All right, welcome everyone to the Grand Rounds September session. I'm Liz Reberedo, a collaborative attorney in the Collaborative Family Law Institute practice group in Miami. Kelly Forrest and I are the co-chairs of the Grand Rounds subcommittee of the FACP Outreach and Practice Group Committees. We're pleased to present the September session of Grand Rounds, a monthly lunchtime training showcasing a different Florida collaborative practice group each month. The first portion of the session will be a group presentation and the balance will be a discussion period where we'll troubleshoot, I got stuck there. We'll troubleshoot and brainstorm solutions to the unique problems presented this session. If you have any questions during the presentation, please place them in the chat and we will kick off the discussion period with those questions. Once the question and answer session begins, please raise your hand by clicking at the bottom of your screen in the reactions box when you would like to speak. So our next session will be held on October 15th, featuring the Collaborative Family Law Group of Northeast Florida. The topic will be parenting issues when the child has a disability, and we'll be featuring attorney Banda Nadal and others. Thank you all for coming, and I'm happy now to introduce my friend and co-chair, Kelly Forrest.
Thank you, Liz. And I'm happy to introduce today's presenters, all of whom are members of the Collaborative Family Law Institute, CFLI, in Miami, with great thanks for their work on today's presentation. Susan Keys is an accredited collaborative family law attorney and Florida Supreme Court certified family mediator who's practiced family law for more than 30 years. Susan is currently the co-president of CFLI. She serves on the FACP board, is the co-chair of the practice group committee for FACP. And she's a member of IACP. Susan restricts her practice to non-adversarial solution-based methods of resolution such as collaborative divorce and pro se pre-suit mediation with divorce without war. Regina Zelonker is a family law lawyer for over 42 years and is a Florida Supreme Court certified family and civil mediator for over 22 years. Regina is an FACP accredited collaborative professional. Her law practice is exclusively a non-court solution-based practice, and her mediation practice serves people who are seeking focused and efficient resolutions to their divorce. Regina is on the board of several nonprofit organizations as well as CFLI. Welcome, Regina. Lana Stern, PhD, is a licensed psychologist, marriage and family therapist, Florida Supreme Court certified mediator, and an FACP accredited collaborative professional. She is a practicing psychologist in the Miami area and an active and enthusiastic proponent of the collaborative process. She's worked extensively on collaborative family law cases as the mental health professional and facilitator. She co-founded Florida Collaborative Trainers and has presented the basic and intermediate training workshops throughout Florida, nationally and internationally. Welcome, Lana. And David Goldweitz, CPA/CVA, is the Senior Director of Tax and Accounting at Fisk & Company. He oversees the firm's Kendall-based office. David is trained as both a family mediator and as a neutral financial professional in the collaborative divorce process. David is a long-standing member of CFLI and has over 4 decades of experience working with businesses and individuals on accounting, consulting, and strategic tax planning. We now turn the hour over to our esteemed presenters for the elephant in the room, infidelity, and the effects on the collaborative case.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I want to start off with a couple interesting facts about infidelity. As stated by the National Institute of Health, adultery remains one of the most common reasons that lead to divorce. 88% of spouses claim that cheating was the main factor to divorcing their partner. New research published by the Science Direct found that men and women are both equally able to cheat on one another. And this is, by the way, in contrast to older studies which found that men were the main culprits. In fact, infidelity shows that 55% of men and 45% of women are involved. I guess we have to figure that the men were involved with the women somehow. Anyway, infidelity definition. An act of betrayal, either emotional or sexual, by one or both spouses that cannot be forgiven. So trust, the main component of any relationship, is often the first and the biggest casualty of infidelity. And how that infidelity can affect divorce cases is what today is really going to be talking about, because if there is no trust, it affects the asset distribution, alimony, time sharing, and sometimes guilt and sense of responsibility really affects how those things are settled. So let's introduce our couple. I'd like you to meet Jack and Jill. Jack is 62. Jill.
Wait, hold on, Lana. We're going to put the fact pattern up and
Okay,
so
sorry.
everyone can follow along.
Okay.
Awkward silence.
That's the elephant in the room, the second elephant in the room.
Regina, are you putting it up?
No, I thought Brittany was putting it up.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started and it'll show up soon. Anyway, Jack is 62, Jill is 60, and they have been married for 35 years. So we're talking about an older couple, an older marriage. They have a grown son engaged to be married, a daughter who's a senior in college, and a son in high school. Jill worked for some years as a teacher and she's now retired. Here it is. Okay, Jack is currently employed at a large high-tech company and earns $300,000 a year, plus benefits. The couple have a marital home in Florida and a second home in North Carolina with a $250,000 mortgage. In addition to the two homes, totaling nearly 2.5 in equity. The couple have investment and cash assets totaling nearly $3 million. There are no liabilities other than the mortgage on the North Carolina home.
Jill recently learned that Jack has been having an affair for nearly a year, and she confronted him. He acknowledged the affair and was ashamed and guilty, but not willing to end the relationship. Jill was devastated by the betrayal and told Jack she thought a divorce was inevitable. The couple decided to try a collaborative divorce and hired Susan, who represents Jack, Regina, who represents Jill, David as the neutral financial professional, and Lana as the facilitator. Immediately after hiring the collaborative professionals, Jill went to stay at their North Carolina home. Jack remained in the marital home, has not changed his lifestyle, and continues to see his girlfriend.
The children are angry with their father and very worried about their mother, emotionally and financially. The college daughter refuses to speak to or see the father, and the older son is not sure he wants the father to attend his upcoming wedding. The younger son is very attached to both of his parents and feels he has been left in the middle.
The financial status quo has been maintained as the couple move forward in the collaborative process. After providing the NFP with ample financial records, the couple reached agreement to sell the marital home and for Jill to retain the North Carolina home. The NFP presented the team with an equitable distribution chart, equalizing the assets and liabilities, and established a husband's net monthly income.
Still you, David.
Lana.
Yeah. Through team meetings and negotiation, Jill believes she is in need of and has requested more than half of Jack's net monthly income as permanent alimony. In addition to the permanent alimony, Jill is requesting that Jack pay off the mortgage on the North Carolina home, which she will retain, with the payoff funds coming from Jack's share of the assets. This would result in an approximate 55% equitable distribution to Jill and 45% to Jack. Jack agreed and the case resolved.
So we're going to discuss
Okay.
how Jack's infidelity factored into the collaborative process and into the settlement, and how the respective professionals played a role with regard to the infidelity. And some of the questions we're going to talk about are listed here, but we can take this off the screen now and begin our discussion.
Well, I think one of the first questions is, can the professionals, especially the neutral professionals, maintain their neutrality when there's admitted misconduct, marital misconduct by one or both of the parties of the couple. And I know that we each walk into every divorce case with our own set of values and our own set of opinions. And of course, we know that emotions really have a great deal of influence on the way that that a case, turns out. And in this particular case, I believe that there was an awful lot of guilt, which Jack was feeling because of the breakup of the family, the effect on the children, and the, I guess, the responsibility that he felt for a 35-year relationship, I'm sure it was probably longer, to Jill. And so it's really interesting to hear how each of the neutrals and the professionals felt about remaining neutral during the process. David, you handled all of the financial assets. So how were you able to maintain your neutrality, even though the distribution turned out to be quite uneven?
Well, you have to be very careful. You have to be, for me at least, you have to be aware of your own feelings. And you have to make sure that those feelings don't interfere with your job as a neutral. You have to maintain that objectivity. In this case, it was a little easier to do than another case I had, because in another case, the person that was responsible for the infidelity didn't care, was very arrogant, and was not very likable, and was not remorseful in any way. So there it presented more challenges than in this particular case. Nevertheless, infidelity was involved in this case as well. But we all come, as you described it, I describe it, we all come to the table with our own set of baggage and our own experiences, and we all have our own moral compass. And it's extremely critical that we do the best we can to remember that we have a job to do. And my job, especially, is not to be an advocate for one party or the other, but is to remain neutral and to do the best job I can to help the parties resolve this matter in a collaborative way.
Thank you, David. I see that Ed has reminded us that part of our ethical code is to maintain our neutrality and not to impose our values on the case at hand. And it's very difficult. I think the mental health professional has to really regulate the emotions, both with the couple and the team, in order to move forward. Regina, you were the attorney representing the wife. Could you speak to how you were able to handle this particular issue?
Thank you, Lana. And I think the attorneys are really the first stop sometimes, even before they consult with the financial professional or the facilitator. So hopefully there's been some interaction and discussion and maybe tamping down of where the person started. So with regard to representing Jill, and I'm taking threads from different cases, as I'm sure Susan will as well. In representing Jill, she was very angry, almost in an attitude of revenge and so forth. So as her attorney, and I'm not a neutral, as her attorney, I need to be supportive and understanding and empathetic, so she feels that somebody's hearing her and understanding her. And at the same time, to help her put in context how those feelings could impact what she's seeking and ultimately an agreement. And I think there is the tricky part for the attorney for the wife, to manage her anger, to look at reasonableness or unreasonableness of what she's seeking, and to always be aware that her goal is to reach an agreement almost in spite of herself. And so that's my role, and to let her present herself to the neutrals with that frame of mind, rather than maybe what she's really, really feeling. at that time.
There was a comment made by Lizette about how much venting of the anger of one spouse should be allowed during a team meeting. We all know from lectures that we've had that once a meeting gets emotionally out of hand, we call it the amygdala hijack, that it's impossible for anyone to really continue with any kind of logical input at that time. So venting absolutely needs to be done, but not in a team meeting, because it really distracts from the forward progress that we're trying to make in terms of coming to solutions and looking at options.
That's true, Lana. And I think we have to balance that with, if it starts in a team meeting and somebody is obviously in pain, because that's why people vent or they're angry, that the team finds a respectful way to end it. Either take a break, go to another room, but not just say, okay, we're not talking about that now, because that's going to make the person feel less valued. So we always have to be on our guard for that.
I also, if I could interject, if there's a dissipation of assets, or if there is the belief that there's a dissipation of assets, that becomes an issue in the, in the discussions, more so than if there's an agreement that there wasn't the dissipation of assets. Because in one case I worked on, there was a concern about that. So it was discussed much more with the group than in the other case, where it was recognized that there probably wasn't. And then the venting took place in a much more private setting.
Now, we haven't really heard very much from the husband's attorney, who may want to weigh in on some of these issues. Susan?
Yes. So Regina touched on the fact that, a lot of cases come into the analysis and what I'm going to say, but in this particular case representing Jack, I oddly had the challenge of sort of reeling him in from giving everything away. He was so guilty and so ashamed, so concerned about repairing the relationship with his children and sort of giving back to the wife, that he was inclined to do more than what the law might otherwise provide. And so I had the challenge of sort of helping him with that guilt and being ashamed and giving things away. And ultimately my worry that he would have regret that he didn't come to as equitable a result as might otherwise be the case. So kind of reeling him in and sort of letting him lead the way, letting your client do what you might feel maybe isn't in their best interest, but allowing them that latitude to get to a settlement that achieves a goal for him. In a different case I had with infidelity, I had quite the contrary result, which is the failure to recognize that this infidelity impacted anybody, that it had any consequence whatsoever in this process, or that any kind of compassion. So as the person representing the infidel, you have to sort of balance between allowing them to recognize what they did and how that factors into the process, and also helping them from sort of feeling terrible guilt and just surrendering. And that was my challenge in this particular case.
We're getting a lot of chats from people out there. I'm wondering if we could open this up.
Yeah, I before you do that, I just want to add one other thing.
Sure.
I felt that I needed to protect my client in any instance, because I think there's an inclination for there to be a siding with the victim by the neutrals. It's human nature. And so one other challenge you have as the person representing the person who committed infidelity is sort of checking in and making sure that neutrality is maintained, being sensitive to that. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you. I think we should open it up for discussion.
No, but I want to make a comment about that. It is sometimes very, very difficult when someone is basically very unlikable to support them in their endeavor when they're not being very fair. I mean, we certainly have all experienced those kind of cases. And it's very difficult to remain neutral and to be really focused in on getting to the best settlement. I am going to open it up to questions and to comments and experiences from other people out there, because according to the statistics, 80% of these cases involve some type of infidelity, which could be sexual, emotional, or it could be a little bit of both.
Lana, I also just wanted to say that for Regina's client, for example, the victim, it was important to remind the victim in this case of the infidelity that they can't overreach in what they want, because, you know, we're in the state of Florida, and in the state of Florida, you know, it's a no-fault state. And if you ask for too much, then you could dramatically, you know, you could hurt the collaborative process and ultimately blow it up. So, you know, Regina's task was just the opposite of Susan's in that particular case. She was to be understanding of the needs, the emotional needs of her client, but also recognize that there is just so far you can go in your demands as it relates to financially in terms of revenge, I think was a term she used.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions that keep coming up about venting and how much is appropriate and when it should happen and how it should happen. And Elaine makes a point here saying that sometimes the venting can take place not necessarily in the team meeting, but either with one or both of the neutrals, where it doesn't disrupt the entire forward motion. I know I've heard of several cases where the mental health person has taken the couple in a room and they have yelled and hit and smashed and crashed and got it worked out. And sometimes they need validation that there has been an affair if it hasn't been forthcoming. At other times, it can be very destructive. And I think it's sort of a case by case, use your judgment about how and when based on the parties and what's going on and so forth. But I would love to hear from other people out there.
Well, let's pose a question. Is it, and people can raise their hand and answer, is it appropriate to ask for an inequitable distribution because there's been infidelity where there's no dissipation? Is that appropriate if that is going to create happiness or some feeling of equity for the wife? Is it appropriate to ask for that? And how does the other side handle that request where there's not necessarily a basis for an inequitable distribution? Anybody want to?
Bob has his hand up.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about the concept of identifying something as being appropriate. We can advise our clients, but ultimately it's their choice. And David sort of going on what you said, advising them that it could blow things up. But ultimately, it's not up to us to determine what's appropriate. It's up to each client to determine and come what may with the results.
Absolutely.
That's difficult for us to do as professionals because we're so used, especially the attorneys, we're so used to controlling the whole show.
Brenda, but you have to go on mute. Thanks.
Brenda has her hand up.
Rhonda had her hand up also, originally, Rhonda Fuchs.
We're overlooking a fundamental question. No, I don't think, to answer the quick question, no, I don't think that an inequitable distribution is always the answer. But I don't think that infidelity is the only reason that marriages end. And I think that the attorneys and the mental health professional have a special responsibility at the very beginning of the case to find out what is really going on in this marriage. Because once you can identify that, it makes handling the infidelity much easier. And I'm speaking from painful experience. I'm in a case now where vengeance is governing the wife. And it took me much too long. I represent the husband, and it took me too long to identify all of the problems in the marriage, because I fundamentally don't believe that marriages end because of one issue.
Very true. Who else has their hand up? Rhonda.
Yeah, I think 95% of my cases, there's been infidelity, but I think it's our job, especially as the neutral facilitator, to get each person's perspective, because sometimes it's not just the person having the affair. They may have been neglected for 9 years. And I mean, there's so much backstory. So I think it's our job to be neutral and not judge, and not to bring in our personal bias. And also to recognize that there is trauma sometimes for the person, oftentimes, who has been cheated on. The thing about venting, I think there's not a right or wrong. I remember my very first case with Brenda. The woman, the wife did vent, but it was controlled. Like, it was appropriate venting in the team meeting, because of course they vent outside the meeting. And afterwards she cried. They settled, and afterwards she cried and said, "It's the first time I was really heard." And so I think it's just a balance, and we as professionals have to do it as a case by case situations.
Lana, can I add something here? Because there's a layer to infidelity that we haven't talked about, which is the trust issue. And sometimes it's not the infidelity, the act itself, because people are making the comments that it was, trouble in the marriage anyway, and this is just a symptom. But sometimes it's even more than the infidelity, is the trust and the lying as a result. And so I think that's something that we all have to be on guard for in general when we look, and this affects David as well, with the assets and liabilities, determining income. It sometimes can paint the entire case.
Well, the essence of the affair is a breach of trust. And so the question becomes, were you lying then, or are you lying now? Can I trust you now, or did I trust you then? So the betrayal and the breaking of trust is a huge, huge issue that is really under all of this. And David, you probably can speak to that as the financial person.
Yeah, because what happened in one case was the spouse, the wife said, "Well, if you lied to me about this, how can I trust you as it relates to the finances? Maybe you're lying to me about that." So it opened up that, which required us, to do work and to look at things. But as Regina said, once that trust is broken, it's that ripple effect, like that pebble in the water. It just expands to many areas, including the finances for sure, which then causes our job as financial neutrals to look a little deeper to see if there has been any dissipation of assets, if the parties want that done. And sometimes, it creates other issues that puts, that we have to deal with. I'll phrase it that way.
I kind of have a question for Susan, because so the question, Susan, is how do you deal with the husband who's always now being accused, like he did wrong? I'm saying it's the husband, it could be the wife. Because I think it's difficult as a lawyer. He did wrong, and now everything is going to be questioned, and he's probably gets to the point of being agitated with that. So how do you handle that?
I've had that challenge, indeed. And I feel that's where being an advocate sometimes comes in, where you have your own relationship with your client, and their reliability and their candor and their responsiveness and their responsibility in that relationship sometimes helps you to persuade the team that while there's been infidelity, there's really no other symptom to show that there's a lack of trustworthiness. And so that's where sometimes the advocacy has to come in. And I've had that challenge. It's like, don't cloak everything with this guy is a liar and a thief just because he had an extramarital affair. And so, yeah, that is a huge challenge. One other thing I wanted to say, we made the inequitable distribution, or the differential between how they divided their assets. I don't want to call it inequitable. It wasn't equal. A 55-45. And depending upon the nature of the assets, that could be a big swing. If there's not actually dissipation that you're compensating the wife for, and there's not actually, so to speak, a need that you're compensating the wife for, how do you sell that to a client if it just makes the wife feel better, if that's really just why we're doing it? As the attorney for the husband, my own viewpoint about what's fair might come in, and my own bias about what's fair. And that was a challenge in this case. How do I share with this spouse that's what's being asked? And even if it were a greater differential, and how do the attorneys, how does everybody feel about sharing that with their client and selling that ask? Anybody want to chime in?
Well, there was something that was brought up by Brenda London, which I think I've been involved in a couple cases like this, where there was dissipation and it involved prostitutes or other, I guess, undesirable things. I know Ed was involved in a case, and I guess there's a question about how much disclosure do you need, even though the wife may be pushing for more and more disclosure. How do you handle that type of situation where it could be, is it just a number that you come up with if they want to know the details? In the case that we were involved in, the wife actually went to one of these places and demanded to see the women that were involved with the husband. And it was really created a lot of, I guess, difficulty for her in reconciling anything after that. I don't know if Ed wants to make a comment about that or not, but how do we manage as the neutrals and as the attorneys to keep our clients satisfied and that we've gotten a correct number, I guess, of dissipation, but yet still maintain the ability to go forward without destroying totally the family relationship, because there were children involved. And we need to talk a little bit about children, but people may have a comment about that.
Elaine Silver had something to say to my question, Lana. So let's let her have a chance to speak, and then maybe we'll pivot to the children too.
I think that's a great question. And I think what we do in every case, collaborative or not, we advise our clients, well, maybe this is what a judge would do. And I hate using that phrase, but I think it's the best one we have. If you went to trial, I have an issue like that right now in a different context. If you went to trial, sure, the result might be X better for you. Here's the way the judge might see it, but nothing's ever simple. And there's a real cost to that. And in your case, maybe, you say to them, if the client is feeling, you know what, I really think that ultimately the kids and the grandkids and everybody will feel better if I do this, and it's worth it to me to make that investment. So that, it's not about us. It's about them and our responsibility to educate, but then to let them make informed decisions.
I so agree. And the way that you said that is so perfect. It's not about us, but sometimes the us, how we're presenting it to our client and sharing it and talking it through with them, is affected by who we are and what we think is right and wrong and what we want and how we affect an outcome. If you share it just neutrally like that, this is how it could be, it's up to you. And that's I think our duty, especially in a collaborative case, to let them be write the script and help them understand the issues that are involved in their decisions. Do we want to turn to some of the children's issues, Lana?
Yeah, the children were very affected, obviously, by the divorce and the circumstances of the divorce. And that's another very, very difficult issue because the children were adults with the exception of the high school student, but the effect that the divorce had on their relationship with their father was really paramount. And so from the experiences that we've had, how do you deal with the children in this case? I mean, recommending that they be in therapy and that they work through those issues in a therapeutic situation or a therapeutic relationship is always good. But how have other people handled the children in a situation like this? I'd like to hear.
What if you're finding out, for example, that the wife is sharing the details of what happened with the children, adult children in this case, or how do you manage that? And
well, in this case, the wife was using the adult children basically as therapist, and without really, I think, understanding, she was so distraught that without really understanding the effect that it was having on the children. So that has to really be addressed kind of directly by the neutral. And again, the recommendation that she have an appropriate outlet, not the children, but a therapist, to try to work through a lot of the issues that were upsetting her so much and not involve the children. But that takes a pretty direct conversation that both the attorney and I think the neutrals would need to have, because it's so detrimental to the family being able to go forward.
Any other mental health professionals want to speak to that? How do you help the wife in this instance maybe share some reason why they're divorcing, but not these kind of details? And how do you manage it if she's already told them?
Randy Heller has her hand up.
Unmute me. You're still muted.
I'm trying. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I joined late, but I was sort of watching a little bit. I've had many cases where one parent wants to tell the children whose fault this is. I've worked as a therapist and marriage counselor in the area of infidelity. And I think there's a few things. One very sensitive notion, but I believe systemically grounded, is that nothing happens in isolation. So perhaps someone cheated. However, that doesn't mean that they are solely responsible for what went wrong in the marriage. And I think we have to help people to understand that. It's a very, very fine tightrope that we walk when we're talking about that, particularly to the person who was cheated on. But I talk about infidelity as a symptom, not as the problem. Infidelity is a symptom of the problems in the marriage. I see a lot of heads nodding, and I'm thrilled to hear that. And it's so delicate to all of us mental health professionals out there to try to help someone to understand that. However, I think if we can help them to understand that, we're helping them to be able to move forward in their life, because otherwise they go through the next phase of their lives thinking they're the victim, the sole victim, and not recognizing part of their part in what went wrong in their marriage, and I share on a personal note, I used to think I was like the perfect wife, right? Well, maybe I was the perfect wife, but I wasn't the perfect wife for my ex-husband. So in my mind, thank you for the laugh, Deborah. In my mind, always thought I was the perfect wife, but not for him. So I had a part in what went wrong in our relationship. And because of that, every action is an invitation for someone else to respond or react. And so we fed off of each other. And in order to help someone move through infidelity, we have to help them to understand that. The other thing that I quote all the time is something I read from Dear Abby years and years and years ago. Those of you who are in my phase in life, remember Dear Abby. And she wrote, when you talk and denigrate another parent, what you're doing is denigrating that child, because that child is a part of that other parent. And so we have to remind people that if we have anger toward the other parent, our children are going to identify with that, personalize that. The emergency that I was on, and the reason I couldn't join, was because I have this woman in the midst of a divorce who hates her son's father so much that she's poisoning her child with the poison. And I had to help her to see that she may be right in everything she hates him for. She may be right, but she's trying to protect her child, but she's harming her child. And we as therapists, I think, and mental health facilitators have to be very, very delicately direct with our clients about the damage that they're doing to their children when they're denigrating another parent. And that's something I have to be very careful with. Those of you who've worked with me know that that's my Achilles, and I need my team to help me with that, because I get very, very emotional about that. But we have to help our clients to know that they're not protecting their children from the other parent, they're hurting them. So that's my approach.
Easier said than done, because sometimes the injured party is so emotionally distraught that they don't see the hurt that they're inflicting on the children, and they don't see that they are harming them because they are so caught up in their pain.
Agreed.
Do
Agreed.
we take action and involve ourselves when there's adult children? I mean, is that part of our process in our collaborative cases? Let's take out that there's a young one here. It's mostly adult children. Rhonda, you were holding your hand up.
Yeah, I think, and Adam brought up about the child specialist.
I thought I was going to speak to that. Yes.
Yeah, I think that I hope that we can all be more mindful on teams to bring in a child specialist for adult children or young children. It doesn't matter. They're still going with the trauma of their family breaking down and the loss and the grief and everything else. But I think sometimes it helps when their parents, people getting divorced, know where their kids are coming from. Some think that kids are clueless, or Randy, as you just said, some use their parent as their child as a therapist. So I just think, and if the teams don't bring on a child specialist, I also think as facilitators, we can check in with the children, or adult or minors.
Karen wants to say something. Unmute, Karen.
I do. I think that as we said, as Randy said, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. And I think adult children and all children do see what's going on. Even if the mom wasn't being, in this case, alienating, I think it's important for us to say, we see how you feel. Your kids may know this already, but let's try and tone it down, because they're going to know it. They're going to see it. Even if she doesn't say anything, they see what's going on in the family. And that's why I agree a child specialist is important, whether it's a gray divorce or we have younger children involved. But it's silly to think that the only way the children are getting this are through the mom wanting, using her as a therapist. They're there, they're living it, they're breathing it, they see it. And that's just the reality. So I just wanted to bring that through.
So I have a question. If my client, when we talk about this proposal that's not equal, if my client says, I'll do anything to get forgiveness, I just want my kids to forgive me and my wife to forgive me, and if this helps for that, then I'm willing to do it. What if it's not going to? What if there's just so much anger and it's not really going to repair anything? Because I don't know that it would in any case, but if I don't even particularly think that it will, how do we share that dynamic with the team and with trying to get the best outcome for everybody, interest-based outcomes?
Well, I don't think, Susan, that we can, I would just like to say, I don't think we can know what the outcomes will be. If people
No.
want to do something, we only can do what they're guiding us to do. And we don't know what the long-term effect is of something like that. We just will never know. So,
Bob, you were going to add to that, I think, as well.
We really can't, you can't buy forgiveness. So we're professionals coming into this family unit and trying to understand what's going on. And we don't know all of the ins and outs. It might very well be that doing something like that is going to calm the waters or make things better. Ultimately, healing takes time, and it may be that this thought of buying forgiveness is only going to do something for the person who's doing the buying, not the person who's receiving. And we advise the clients, and it's like Regina was saying, you really don't know what's going to happen. It might work, it might not, but there's no guarantee. And that's you could say that about everything we're doing.
I think as the
There's no
attorney for the
guarantee.
husband, educating him on that outcome too, that you have to do it because it's what you want to do, not because it's necessarily going to have a consequence, an ultimate consequence that you're searching for.
Or the ultimate benefit. And if there are adult children involved, what the adult children would be concerned about, or one of the things they would be concerned about is my mom going to be okay financially? I mean, is she going to be taken care of? Am I going to have to assume the burden of making sure that, she could meet her bills? And so that's, something that's a dynamic that is different than with young kids who don't understand that concept.
In this particular case, I really do believe that Jack felt guilty, but I think that he was also very, very concerned that the woman that he spent 35 years married to, had 3 children, needed to be taken care of. And I think that he felt it was his responsibility to make certain that that happened, even if the distribution was unequal. I think he really felt a responsibility, not 100% from guilt, but just because of the association for so long. Brenda?
Absolutely.
I think that we have an obligation to help our clients decide whether they can deal with the situation in an unequal, equitable distribution or increased alimony. Sometimes the answer is to give more on a monthly basis than to divest yourself of your ability to earn. And I think that's a lawyer's responsibility to help a client think through. But we've had this discussion only in terms of equitable distribution. And there is another solution. And the solution might be easier if there's more alimony.
But remember, in this particular case, Brenda, the parties are older, and we just don't know how many more years the husband will be working. So
that's why I said,
right.
That's why I said what I said, Jack. If you protect his investment income to make sure that he can pay monthly support, she has more of a guarantee than if you give up everything.
Yeah, there's lots of ways to get there, and lots of different ways to get there, including the alimony or the distribution. Regina and I had such perfect clients in this case that it really was to deliver a safe landing for this in this long-term marriage, and to create a safety net and a future that was bright for her, coupled with the hope that it would also create some repair. These were, really good people that we're referring to, and we sometimes twist the facts to make it more unique of a case, but it really was about that.
Randy.
So I don't know, Ed, if you shared anything from our beautiful case last week, but to me, it's so relevant to this conversation because we settled a case last week that was probably one of the most difficult cases I've ever been on. And the husband, and there were very similar issues, infidelity, an unequal distribution. The husband mentioned as one of his initial goals, the legacy he wanted to leave to his adult sons, and the way in which he wanted his adult sons to view how he handled the divorce. And even though he was devastated by, to his words, everything he had to lose, what I continued to remind him about, we were in caucus, I was talking with him alone because it was about ready to fold. The case was about ready to fold. And I was talking with him about and reminding him about his goal of a legacy for his children and the beauty of the reality that he could rebuild. He said, the only thing I've ever had in my life is everything I built for myself. And I said, and you will again. And I'm reminding you of the legacy you want to leave to your children. I'm reminding you of what you said about how you want your children to talk about how you cared for their mom. And he settled because he was reminded of what was important. And I think we have to really, really, I call it bumper bowling, keep them centered, keep them grounded, keep them remembering what was important. And sometimes it's more than money. And we settled it. It was an incredible, I hope we'll be able to present it someday, case. But I think that's part of the key.
Okay. Well, I think we've pretty much covered almost all the points that we wanted to cover. We've talked a lot about how to deal with the unequal distribution. We've talked about dealing with the children somewhat. We've talked about, I guess,
maintaining neutrality as professionals and checking in with ourselves as we come to a situation of infidelity, for sure.
I think one of the good things about this particular case was that the team was able to work together to help maintain the neutrality, even though it was very challenging because the wife really, I think, did want some revenge and was terribly angry. But I think it was very useful that the team was able to work together and helping the couple reach the point that they did and get a good settlement out of it. Any last minute remarks? We have a few minutes left for things that that maybe we didn't cover. I'm trying to see. We covered it.
Liz?
I want to mention that I think especially in cases like this and many others, it's such a great example of why collaborative is so wonderful. I mean, to have a mental health professional that can go through these issues with the clients and even with the attorneys to try to figure out how best to help our clients is just a godsend. And so I'm very appreciative for the collaborative process that it provides.
I have a question.
Agree.
I have a question. From the fact statement, I was uncertain as to what was actually done on the alimony component. Was there a combination of paying more than her needs justified and giving her an unequal distribution, or did
her needs? Yeah.
Did the
He
latter?
gave her his whole
Good
salary.
question.
He gave her his whole salary. No, just kidding.
They basically shared the income. They shared the income.
So
And
that
it was totally an
mitigated-
equal
Okay,
sharing
that
of the
mitigated-
income and sharing of the assets, but then not just sharing the
Okay,
assets.
that wasn't clear from the fact statement. And
Right.
It makes, I had to assume that was probably a quid pro quo to get her off the excessive request. Okay, thank you.
Correct.
So since 80% of your cases are going to involve infidelity, we hope that we have given you a little bit of insight into some of the issues and some of the options and some of the solutions, perhaps from mistakes that we've made or from things that we've learned from our cases. And we wish you luck, because these cases, it's almost like it's the red herring in every case, because as so many of you pointed out, it's really a lot of underlying issues that create, I think, infidelity, and that we have to be very, very aware of how all of those little things play into the larger picture, all the little ends, odds and ends that play into it. So I want to wish everybody good luck, and on behalf of Collaborative Family Law Institute of Miami and everybody that is in this audience and everybody else that practices collaborative, we thank you so much for your support of collaborative, and these grand rounds are just incredible.
Incredible.
Thank you so much.
Liz, you have something to add, I'm sure. Or
Yes.
Kelly.
Well, I just wanted to say on behalf of Kelly and myself, thank you so much to the presentation today, for the presentation today, you guys. It was a great presentation, very dynamic, interactive. I think we probably could have gone on for another hour or so, but we won't. So we'd like to thank you all for attending. Please remember to send us any suggestions you may have. And I think some came up today in the chat for any future grand rounds, and to register for next month's session, October 15th. Someone had a question? No.
I want to thank Kelly and Liz because they work very hard to get these programs going. They're excellent. We've all benefited from them. So thank you both too for your hard work. And Brittany too, who's behind the scenes always. Thanks, Brittany.
Yes,
Thank
thank you. Thank you very much. And thank
We'll
you.
see you
Brittany.
next month, you guys.
Yes.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.